now for the rest of the chant. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the divine being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the divine being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. So, this morning, well, once again, welcome to everyone. Namaste, so good to see you all. This morning we will discuss the practice of love. The universe, as we shall see, is a mirror. What you experience is a reflection of what and who you are now. And we often think of karma as something having to do with our past. Well, it may, but that's not ponderable. There's no way for us to really know about that. What we can know is who we are now through introspection, contemplation, concentration, and meditation. So the universe is a reflection of who you are and what you are now. If you are harmful to others, you will be harmed by others. If you are deceitful or calculating, that is how you will be treated. If you take more than you need or steal, you will be stolen from. And when you practice love and compassion, this will be what you find in the world. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. That is the law. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. That is the law. But we don't need to think about that as something about the past. Right now, who are you now? What do you do now? So listen to what a very great saint, Saint Francis of Assisi, prays for. Now, the title of this prayer is Our Need for Thee. In our ever-present need for Thee, beloved, let us know your peace. Let us be your instruments that break every shackle, for do not the caged ones weep? And give us our inheritance of divine love, so that we can forgive like you. And let us be wise, so that we do not wed another's madness and make them in debt to us for the deep gash their helpless, raging lance will cause. Darkness is an unlit wick. It just needs your touch, beloved, to become a sacred flame. And what sadness in this world could endure if it looked into your eyes? God is like a honeybee. He doesn't mind me calling him that. For when you are kind, sweet, he nears and can draw you into himself. What is there to understand of each other? If a wand turned the sun into the moon, would not the moon mourn the ecstatic effulgence it once was? We are all in mourning for the experience of our essence we knew and now miss. Light is the cure. All else is a placebo. Yes, I will console any creature before me that is not laughing or full of passion for their art or life. For laughing and passion, beauty and joy is our heart's truth. All else is labor and foreign to the soul. I have stood in his reign and now fill granaries as the fertile plains, I have stood in his reign and now fill granaries as do the fertile plains. Giving is as natural to love as sound from the mouth. There is a courageous dying. It is called effacement. That holy death unfurls our spirit's wings and allows us to embrace God even as we stand on the earth. There is a courageous dying. It is called effacement. That holy death unfurls our spirit's wings and allows us to embrace God even as we stand on the earth. That reading was from Love Poems from God, 12 Sacred Voices from the East and West by Daniel Ladinsky. Saint Francis says we can embrace God even as we stand on the earth, even so as we say, as we are embodied. So let's talk about how to do that. But first, are there any comments or questions about Saint Francis's prayer? I don't want to go beyond that wonderful prayer without offering you the opportunity to ask any questions or offer us any reactions to what Saint Francis said. All right. If any of you want that prayer, it will be on the website along with the talk. You just go to the archives and go to this talk. There will be a PDF of the talk notes for this talk. And that, of course, will be part of it if you want that prayer. As we know, September has been a month for the study of Bhakti Yoga. A Bhakti yogi, a Bhakta, has a devotional relationship with God. This devotional relationship is developed over time by study, prayer, ritual, and worship. As a Bhakta, you practice giving every action, thought, emotion, perception, and tendency a Godward turn. Everything you are, both positive and negative, is offered to the divine presence. Your prayer is for the carefree self-surrender of a child in its mother or father's arms, and ultimately union with your beloved. That's the Bhakti's path, the path of devotion. So this morning, we're going to hear what the Baal Shem Tov. Tomorrow is Yom Kippur, of course, a very holy day for the Jewish community. The Baal Shem Tov, as we'll hear, was an exemplary Jewish saint. So the title of today's talk is Baal Shem Tov and the Practice of Love. Here's a quote from the Baal Shem Tov. Neither thinking about the day of one's death, nor the fear of punishment in hell will arouse a person's heart to serve God. But yearning to cling to the source of life and goodness will do so. and neither fasting nor afflicting oneself will be of any help, but forgetting oneself out of the depth of one's yearning will do so. That is that self-effacement, that holy death that St. Francis was talking about. Neither fasting nor afflicting oneself will be of any help, but forgetting oneself out of the depths of one's yearning will do so. The Baal Shem Tov. This Jewish saint's mystical wisdom is familiar to us. Sri Ramakrishna also taught that yearning can draw you into an intimate relationship with the personal God or goddess. For those of you who aren't familiar with those terms, what is the personal God or goddess? Sri Ramakrishna tells us that the personal God, Bhagavan or Ishvara or incarnation of God, and in its feminine manifestation, Ishvara or Shakti, or any of the names of the Divine Mother, is Brahman, the indefinable, the indescribable, the inscrutable, is Brahman with name and form. One and the same, the personal God and the impersonal Brahman, the personal God or goddess, and personal or personal, is the same. It's the impersonal with name and form. And as Sri Ramakrishna said, using this metaphor, water in waves or water unmoving is the same water. So this is how we hear what the Baal Shem Tov just said. From this understanding that yearning is the key. Yearning is a form of love, of course. We yearn for our beloved. Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, which means master of the good name, was founder of the 18th century Hasidic movement in Eastern Europe. He lived from 1698 to 1760, from 1698 to 1760. In other words, he was in his 63rd year when he left the body. Now, master of the good name, what does that mean? In the Jewish mystical tradition, it means a Mahayogi, one who is in possession of omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence. The name, as it says in Chaitanya's prayer, various are thy names, O Lord. In each and every name thy power resides. And so we have master of the good name. It means master of the name of God, which of course is not said in the name of God is not said in the traditional Jewish way of being and thinking. So he founded the Hasidic movement in the 18th century, the 1700s. Now it has changed a great deal from the way that he founded. If you look into what it was that he founded, you'll see that it was open and very free. As with almost all spiritual traditions, over time they tend to become more narrow and hidebound. And so this is what has happened to the Hasidim. But it doesn't mean that there is not still great spiritual power in that Hasidic movement. It's just that they are now more regularized, more regulated, and so on. The Baal Shem Tov helped revolutionize Jewish thought. and gave new hope to an embattled people. The transformative power of the Baal Shem Tov's teachings are still felt today by his followers, the Hasidim, by other rabbis and observant Jews, and by any of us who can experience the uplifting effects of the saint's legacy. This morning, we will hear and discuss some of the Baal Shem Tov's principles, relating his wisdom to what we study as Bhakti Yoga. A little background about the Baal Shem Tov and why someone of his character needed to emerge for the Jewish community of Eastern Europe. During the late 17th century, European Jewry, the European Jews, were still recovering from the pogroms of 1648 and 1649. These horrible massacres killed tens of thousands of Jews in Russia and in Eastern Europe. The survivors were still struggling to rebuild their lives and communities. A translator for the Baal Shem Tov, David Schulman, writes this: "Following are some of the principles that the Baal Shem Tov taught his holy students. This precious text was found in the possession of a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov in Hamburg." So in other words, this was authentic. It was in the possession of a grandson. As I no longer have them. I gave them to my son, but I have letters from my grandfather and so on. And now this is the first principle. And this is absolutely key to the rest of this talk, so please listen carefully. Everything that happens in this world, no matter how insignificant, comes from God. And so do not concern yourself with whether or not what has occurred is in accordance with your will. I'm going to say that this is something we can take as seriously as the writings or the speaking of an Upanishadic sage, an illumined soul. Everything that happens in the world, no matter how insignificant, comes from God. And so do not concern yourself with whether or not what has occurred is in accordance with your will. Now, I'm going to use the word Torah. The Torah for the observant Jew is the books of Moses and is regarded as, in the same way that we in the community of the Sanatana Dharma, commonly called Hinduism, it is Shruti, that which Moses heard from God and related to us, combined with some smriti, that which is remembered, things that were written down, Moses wrote down or related and were later written down. But this is scripture. So the Torah is regarded as very, very sacred by the observant Jew. So the Baal Shem Tov says the entire Torah and the entire world contain nothing but the light of the Infinite One, blessed be He, concealed within them. The entire Torah and the entire world contain nothing but the light of the Infinite One concealed within them. All the verses that speak of this, such as there is no other than he, and I fill the heavens and the earth, are to be taken literally. All the verses of scripture that speak of this, saying such as, there is no other than he, and I fill the heavens and earth, are to be taken literally. That is to say, omnipresence, omniscience, omnipotence. These words are foundational to any understanding of the saints' words. There is no act, word, or thought in which the essence of divinity is not constricted and hiding. Constricted is a wonderful translation of the Sanskrit word moha. We normally translate it as limitation. But I love the way the word constriction or constricted says that there's much contained there that is not immediately known. It's limited, but it can be known to us. And here's how, and the Baal Shem Tov immediately addresses this. There is no act or word or thought in which the essence of divinity is not constricted and hiding. And when you look and see with your mind's eye, you will see the inner life force aspect of everything, not just its outer superficial layer. You will see nothing but the divine power inside all things that is giving them life, being, and existence at every moment. And when you listen carefully to the inner voice within any physical sound that you hear, you will hear only the voice of God. As at that moment, it is literally giving life and existence to this sound that you are hearing. In Sanskrit, that term is Shabda Brahman. Brahman in the form of sound. When you listen carefully to the inner voice within any physical sound that you hear, you will hear only the voice of God, as at that moment, it is literally giving life and existence to the sound that you are hearing. The exile of God's presence refers to the life force and divine power that gives a person life and existence, even at the moment that he is transgressing God's will. Neither thinking about the day of one's death or the fear of punishment in hell will arouse a person's heart to serve God, but yearning to cling to the source of life and goodness will do so. And neither fasting nor afflicting oneself will be of any help. But forgetting oneself out of the depths of one's yearning will do so. I've returned to that because there is a direct parallel to this in that quote, in that poem, that prayer of St. Francis. There is a courageous dying. It is called effacement. That holy death unfurls our spirit's wings and allows us to embrace God even as we stand on the earth. There is nothing more intimate in love than an embrace. So this allows us, if we have this yearning, it allows us to embrace God even as we are embodied. Now, as you hear this next, hear the Sanskrit term that we've spoken of many times, one of the Mahavakyas, one of the great sayings of the Upanishads, Tattvamasi, that thou art. What the Baal Shem Tov said is every person in his own right is essentially a complete spiritual Torah. If he goes in God's path, that Torah is absorbed into his being according to his level. And of course, that level continues to change for us as we mature spiritually. And the highest level is a knower of Brahman. A knower of Brahman becomes Brahman, that complete spiritual Torah. God's providence extends to all created beings, even to inanimate objects and plants. There is nothing that is not viewed from above in every detail. Everything was made with a particular intent, and a word to the wise is sufficient. This is, of course, why we're encouraged to ahimsa, harmlessness. Ahimsa cannot be done except as an act of love. You can take a stand for being harmless, but as long as you're not doing these actions or refraining from any particular actions out of understanding and love, they will miss the mark. They will miss the mark. Next saying of the Baal Shem Tov, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Why? Because every human being has a root in the unity. And to reject the minutest particle of the unity is to reject it all. Your fellow man is your mirror. If your own face is clean, the image you perceive will also be flawless. But should you look upon your fellow man and see a blemish, it is your own imperfection you are encountering. You are being shown what it is that you must correct within yourself. So this is what I meant by the universe is a mirror. Your fellow man is your mirror, your fellow human beings. If your own face is clean, the image you perceive will also be flawless. But should you look upon your fellow man and see a blemish, it is your own imperfection you are encountering. You are being shown what it is that you must correct within yourself in order to be open, loving, and for that matter, vulnerable. Now, Goethe, who had a way of putting things into very fine aphorisms, said, and of course the masculine pronoun reflects the time in which he wrote, Goethe wrote, "A man sees in the world what he carries in his heart." So as we do our spiritual practices, we purify our hearts. And so we see a greater and greater divinity in the world because we're perceiving that divinity within our own hearts. Back to the Baal Shem Tov. The ideal of man is to be a revelation himself, clearly to the ideal of a man is to be a revelation himself, clearly to recognize himself as a manifestation of God. Now, of course, this is what the scriptures of India tell us. Tattvamasi. You are that. And if we analyze it, if we stop and think about it, if God made everything and God is everything, then there can be no doubt that we are a manifestation of the divine. And its corollary, which is very well discussed in the Svatasvatara Upanishad. This is what the Baal Shem Tov says. Whenever feeling downcast, each person should vitally remember, for my sake, the entire universe was created. Now, that cannot be true of the small personality. It cannot be true for the body, but it can be true for our inner divine self, which is the root and capable entity of practicing love. William Blake, who had a wry sense of humor, wrote, "We should think of ourselves as highly as immortals ought to think." We should think of ourselves, not our small selves, but our true selves. We should think of ourselves as highly as immortals ought to think. And then the truth that is expressed by every one of the great teachers, every one of the great teachers. Forgetfulness leads to exile, while remembrance is the secret of redemption. When we forget about our divinity and about the divine presence, there is that separation. And when there is that separation, there is fear and doubt, and there is no love possible in the presence of fear and doubt. So forgetfulness leads to exile, while remembrance is the secret of redemption, of our recovery to ourselves. Everybody is unique. Compare not yourself with anybody else, lest you spoil God's curriculum. Again, the humor of the saint. Everybody is unique. Compare not yourself with anybody else, lest you spoil God's curriculum. See to it that every day you do some act of goodness and kindness. In fact, you should eagerly anticipate, perhaps God will arrange such a good happenstance. Now, when I first read this, it immediately came to my mind that this is what Vivekananda said. Pray that in each day something will happen that gives you the opportunity to be of service, because that's what will lift you up and purify you. And now the Baal Shem Tov has this lovely little parable. There was once a king who was a magician, and so he invited people to have a relationship, a personal connection with him. But as one entered his palace grounds, there were millions of gold coins for the taking. Most people came and took some money, Some came beyond the palace grounds to the interior, where they found even greater riches. And so it was, chamber after chamber. However, the king's son ignored all that and went straight to the king. I think we grasp the significance of that. The next of the Baal Shem Tov's sayings. Take no pride in the good you have done. Imagine that it was God. Now, when you come from this place, the good that you do becomes spontaneous. You have no thought for the fruits of those actions. And so you become capable of true love. Take no pride in the good works you have done. Imagine that it was God. I, God, have not changed. It is only that God conceals himself in the miraculous repetitiveness of nature. However, once a man is aware that everything is God, one of the fundamental secrets, there is no separation and no concealments. And I think we can very much relate to what Sri Krishna says in the Gita. When you see that he's telling the truth, Krishna is telling the truth, that you are not the doer. The doer is God himself. One of the fundamental secrets, there is no separation and no concealments. And then the last of the Baal Shem Tov's principles that I'm going to read is about our humility. And it reflects what Sri Chaitanya says in his prayer. Take no honor to thyself, give honor to all. O my mind, be humbler than a blade of grass. Be patient and forbearing like the tree. Take no honor to thyself, give honor to all. And so the last of the Baal Shem Tov's principles that I'll read is, for any of us to come to the understanding that we are common and unlearned is the accomplishment of a lifetime. So before I go to the last of what I have to offer you this morning, I'm sure that some of you must have some comments or questions about what has been read here from the Baal Shem Tov and the commentary that's been made on it. It is these ideas and these principles that allow us to practice love. So any questions or comments, please. This is how we do this together. This is us as a congregation.
Brother Shankara, Keith.
Yes, yeah, Keith.
Really appreciate when you bring in the perspectives of other faiths and how they tie into each other. It goes a long way just to really bring home the fact that we are really all one.
Yes.
In disparate parts of the world, separated from each other, we came up with the same principles. And the only way that makes any sense is if there's one source.
Exactly. And if you study the life of the Baal Shem Tov, you'll see that he was an orphaned boy who spent a lot of time in the forest by himself as a boy. And as most of the saints, somehow, many of them developed this intense relationship with the forces of nature. And so that became the foundation for his mysticism. And then he encountered a teacher who gave him, who was himself a mystical, and they had to be hidden in those days because they would be persecuted, hounded, killed. He was taken to a teacher who gave him his Judaism. Of course, being an orphan boy, he hadn't been brought up, one would say, properly in the Jewish tradition. So his discoveries were based on first his own inner experiences, which of course are unquestionable. When we have those experiences, they're unquestionable. And then he found the teachings of the Torah and beyond, the mystical, the Kabbalistic teachings of Judaism. And he became this master of the good name. Thank you, Keith.
One last comment. I did grab Jewel Bolte Taylor's book and loving it so far. Thank you for the recommendation.
Oh, I'm glad you like it. I'm glad it's irresistible. She's such a winning personality. Anybody else, please? What does this give rise to? All of these things that the Baal Shem Tov said that are the foundation for our ability to practice love.
Brother Shankara, Haima.
Yes, Haima.
The sentence you gave us, the universe is a mirror and our fellow man is a mirror too. Just very, very, very true. We see ourselves in so many other people because we're all coming from the same conscience, the same spirit. So we all have the same qualities in different ranges, maybe different degrees. So
Yes.
it's very
Exactly, dear.
powerful statement, very powerful.
Exactly. And this is the power of Goethe's statement. A person sees in the world what they carry in their heart.
Yes, that's true.
So if you are...
And also it gives us opportunity to look at our flaws and remove them. That's the opportunity to see ourselves in the universe, which you said it so clearly. Very, very true. I can't disagree with that.
Yes, there's so much misunderstanding about karma.
Yes.
Karma is not... We may have done things in the past that represented our ignorance. But if we have purified ourselves in the meantime, as Krishna says in the Gita, I see no sinner. But if you're still carrying the seeds of those things, then destiny, as Mother said, destiny, who has written these things down in the book of record, there must be a lesson that will finally convince you that way of being and doing is keeping you separate from the truth of yourself. That's why all these karmic experiences, these things that suddenly pop out of nowhere, it seems, and give us grief. Well, first of all, we tend to blame the messenger, the person who brought us the karma. Instead, we should thank them. When Jesus said, when you are struck on one cheek, present the other. Why? Because the fact that you were struck on the one cheek was meant to be as a lesson to you. So you present the other cheek to say, do I still need that lesson? Or have I learned my lesson that striking others on the cheek is not the way to behave? And so, and also, if someone demands your cloak, give him your coat also. Because if your karma is such that someone demands your cloak of you, then have you learned your lesson about the necessity of giving things when they're asked? Give them away. So give him your coat also. This is the practice of love. Love is not something theoretical. It's something that we do or do not do every moment. And when we are appropriate in the moment, and by appropriate, I don't mean good and bad. I just mean when we are doing what is in accord with the aspects that are actually presenting themselves in the moment, then we don't have to worry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jaime.
Thank you.
Shankara,
Yes, dear.
each and every principle. Hello.
Yeah, I'm here. We're all here.
Each and every principle that you quoted is so rich and it's so powerful. And when you talked earlier about yearning for God, it's so common among all the realized souls, like Ramakrishna Paramahans himself,
Yes.
who said that yearning, without that first intense yearning for God, all other things take, not precedence, but yearning must be there. Similarly, I'm reminded of Mirabai,
Mm-hmm.
Rajasthani queen in 16th century India.
Uh-huh.
She gave up everything. She was a married woman, married into a very orthodox Rajasthani family. And it was a blasphemy for her to go after all the sadhus and saints and dance in the street, just like Chaitanya. And
Mm-hmm.
she was actually called Meera Prem Divani, means one who is mad for God. So she had that intense passion, yearning for Krishna.
Yes.
Since she was a child. So what I'm thinking that Baal, then Mirabai, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Ramakrishna, even Vivekananda and all that, they all agree in principles. And not only that, but they demonstrate through their own life what they mean by those principles.
Yes, indeed.
It's so deeply exemplary for us that principles are to be followed, to be lived. And prem, what is prem? The Sanskrit word is prem, for love. But we are talking about divine love.
Mm-hmm.
And when that divine element enters our ordinary worldly relationships, then we take it a notch higher.
Yes.
Of God.
Exactly.
So thank you so much. And I remember your lecture of 2017 that you gave on Balshev. I still have the notes.
Mm.
But what I learned is every time, as you say and add some of the things, it becomes more and more powerful.
Now, this is what Swami Swahananda told me to do.
Yes.
He said, develop a talk, and then after a while, give it again.
Yes.
But not the same way you gave it the first time.
Exactly. You add.
What have you learned in the meantime?
Yeah.
Add that.
Yes.
And those were his instructions.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
Yeah, hi. I have a question about karma. I know that every religion, science, it all points to karma, but I have trouble understanding, like when I look in the practical world, how does this happen? Because you see people who are doing what they shouldn't do, and instead of it coming back, it seems like it multiplies the chances of doing more of, what's not right. And so how is karma working for somebody who's not doing the right thing? When does it come back? Or
It's not a question, as I said, dear, of it's what exists within them. Who are they? As it's said in the Chandi, Mother, you are good fortune in the home of the virtuous, in ill fortune in the home of the vicious. But as you say, and we have to remember how limited our time perspective is, dear. Our time perspective is, as Sri Ramakrishna said, by saying this dramatically, trying to bring it home to us. A human life is of only 2 days duration. So because of the fact that we do believe in transmigration or reincarnation, which Krishna explains flat down in chapter 2 of the Gita, you shed one garment, you take another as you proceed on your spiritual adventure. But who you are, this moment, will govern what's going to happen to you. And we often don't know. We see someone and their life superficially. We really don't know what's going on inside them and what torment they may have about what they're grasping for, what they're hoarding, and how they feel about it. They may be in torment because they can't trust anyone. Why does that person want to be my friend? Why do they want to be near me? What is it that they want? I mean, this is the fact that we see this superficial quote success unquote that these people have. But as it's said in the Chandi, Mother, it is your nature to subdue the conduct of the wicked.
yeah,
In time, something will happen. And as I pointed out, our time perspective is so limited. So what will happen to that person 2 more lifetimes down the road when the messenger finally arrives with the karma that, but the messenger is there because of who they still are in that moment. If in those 2 lifetimes they have learned differently, if they in the lifetimes intervening they have learned differently, as Sri Krishna very, very carefully points out, if you change, God doesn't change, you change. If you change and see the folly of your ways and turn in devotion and love to me, the divine presence, then he says, I see no sinner. And Holy Mother says, destiny herself strikes from the book of record what is written there about you. And so something will happen.
Mhm.
But if you were to have a terrible sword blow that severs your leg, but you no longer need that lesson because of the purification that you have become, the pure one that you have become in the meantime. As Mother said, you will receive a pinprick. So it seems to us that nothing is happening to these people. 2 points, I'll just recapitulate. 2 points. We really don't understand, we really don't know what it is that they're experiencing in terms of inner torment, even though they put a good face on it. And we can live in the attitude and conviction that as ye sow, so shall ye reap. It will come back to visit them if they still need it. Thanks for asking that question. That we constantly have these questions about karma, and one of the things that the Baal Shem Tov says is, don't worry about it. Everything is in accordance with God's will. So what we might want to have happen to that person, the appropriate thing will happen to them according to God's will.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
I just wanted to say that I always get a little concerned when I hear this world as mirror philosophy, because in practical life, I see so many people using it as a way to blame those who are being abused, genocide, the Holocaust, hurricane, whatever it is, people who are suffering. There are people who use that world as mirror philosophy as a way to say, oh, they deserve that.
Well,
coming around. And so I get really,
yes, Marla, this is so far from the practice of love. And
yes.
we can recognize the world as a mirror and still say, these people deserve our love and compassion. They are our very own. They are our sisters and brothers. So we should extend every love and compassionate help to them. Because we don't know, we simply don't know why things happen. We don't know. And when people say, oh, they deserve it. Well, it very well may be that the universe as a mirror has visited this on them. But that should not be our concern. We should think about ourselves in that regard. What we see in the world, what we are, that's the mirror we should be concerned about, and not be judgmental of others. And I agree, people do that. Oh my goodness, you hear it from those television evangelists all the time. New Orleans suffered this because of all of those homosexuals and other perversions that exist there, and they will suffer and suffer the fires of hell. Now, who am I quoting? Huh? I'm quoting my grandfather. No, I didn't hear him say that. But he was, he was in the Depression. And afterwards, he was a hellfire and damnation tent preacher in the Central Valley of California. Oscar Moore. How misguided. How misguided. But this is the way of, as Hafiz said, those who worship tiny gods. Gods who love constriction rather than compassion and love. Thank you, Marla. You're absolutely right. It is so inappropriate to use this mirror as a way to judge others. We can't judge others. It's just foolishness. It's only a way to keep reality at arm's length and not have to deal with the fact that those people are suffering, and that calls to us as an opportunity for service. Judgment is just a way to keep reality at arm's length. So so when we practice it, what did Christ say? Judge not, lest ye be judged. And he was just saying, you know, as ye sow, so shall ye reap.
Shankara?
Yes, dear.
Yes, could you expand more on, you quoted Christ about the cheek when somebody hits you on one side, you offer the other cheek. Could you expand and clarify on that?
Well, if you're struck on one cheek, what is that? That's your karma. Have you learned the lesson so that you do not retaliate? If you've learned the lesson that striking the person striking another person, being harmful, it's not a question of right and wrong. It's a question of what is good for you. What will benefit your spiritual growth. So if you're struck on one cheek, rather than retaliate or become defensive, if you've truly learned the lesson, then you have no hesitation to present the other cheek. As Father Thomas Keating said, if you truly trust God, you don't have a care in the world. Now, does that mean we become a doormat for other people? No. There are times when we have to hiss. We have to make a vicious person back off. Because it's their nature to sting. It's their nature to be vicious. But that the ideal, we must never compromise the ideal. The ideal is that we should be able to present the other cheek, trusting that if we have learned our lesson about not striking people on the cheek, not doing violence to others, and there's no risk, there's nothing, we will not be struck on the other cheek. So this is why the spiritual life is called the razor's edge. We're walking on a razor's edge.
In other words, we should not be having the spirit of revenge.
Absolutely not.
Not, yes.
We should.
Not tit for tat.
It should be. It should be immediately recognized for what it is, and discriminated against. Saying, if I do this, I simply continue the cycle of bad karma. As Gandhiji pointed out, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth leaves everyone blind and toothless. So he was able to practice ahimsa and satyagraha.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. The world be at peace if that was true,
Yes,
yeah.
but it's one person at a time, dear.
Yes.
Peace will never happen as long as the majority of people are something other than peaceful.
Thank you.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
This is Swayam.
Yes, Swayam.
Wonderful, wonderful talk as always. And as I'm listening to it, the mind starts making connections to the other. So two things that I sort of recalled is Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda's teachings. Sri Ramakrishna said to householders, hold on to God with one hand and world with the other. And then over time, you can hold on to God with both hands.
Yes.
And then serve Jiva as Shiva. And these are useful to me because sometimes the concept of God out there, it's difficult to hold on to and love and have emotions, but the manifest creation, it's easier to develop that relationship and
Well,
use that as a
with
anchor.
the understanding, dear, that is God. There is nothing but God.
Right.
Even if we just are taking a stand for it in the beginning. So it's like the story about love your goat. We start with loving what we can love. Then we see what love is and what it is that we're truly loving, which is the self. Now, I have a final reading. We've had a wonderful discussion, and this final reading is from Sri Ramakrishna. And here's how it goes. On Sunday, April 9th, 1882, Sri Ramakrishna was seated with his devotees in the drawing room of Prankrishna Mukherjee's house in Calcutta. Many neighbors had been invited to come and speak with Sri Ramakrishna. One of the neighbors asked, "Sir, is it ever possible to realize God while leading the life of a householder?" Master, certainly. But as I said, one must live in holy company and pray unceasingly. One should weep for God. When the impurities of the mind are thus washed away, one realizes God. The mind is like a needle covered with mud, and God is like a magnet. The needle cannot be united with the magnet unless it is free from mud. Tears wash away the mud, which is nothing but lust and greed and other evil tendencies, and the inclination to worldly enjoyments as well. As soon as the mud is washed away, the magnet attracts the needle. That is to say, man realizes God. Only the pure in heart see God. A fever patient has an excess of the water element in his system. What can quinine do for him unless that is removed? Why shouldn't one realize God while living in the world? But as I said, one must live in holy company, pray to God, weeping for his grace, and now and then go into solitude. Unless the plants on a footpath are protected at first by fences, they are destroyed by cattle. The neighbor responds, then householders too will have the vision of God, won't they? Master, everybody will surely be liberated, but one should follow the instructions of the Guru. If one follows a devious path, one will suffer in trying to retrace one's steps. This is karma. If one follows a devious path, one will suffer in trying to retrace one's steps. It takes a long time to achieve liberation. A man may fail to obtain it in this life. Perhaps he will realize God only after many births. Sages like Janaka performed worldly duties. They performed them bearing God in their minds, as a dancing girl dances, keeping jars or trays on her head. Haven't you seen the women in Northwest India walk, talking and laughing while carrying water pitchers on their heads? Neighbor, you just referred to the instructions of the Guru. How shall we find him? Anyone and everyone cannot be a guru. A huge timber floats on the water and can carry animals as well. But a piece of worthless wood sinks if the man sits on it and drowns him. Therefore, in every age, God incarnates himself as the Guru to teach humanity. Satchidananda alone is the Guru. I'm going to interrupt. in breaker of this world's chain, Swami Vivekananda says, breaker of this world's chain, we adore thee whom all men love. And then, how great was thy sacrifice, freely choosing thy birth in this prison, our iron age, to unchain us and set us free. Now this Vivekananda wrote about Sri Ramakrishna, but it doesn't mean you have to follow Sri Ramakrishna. All of the incarnations are timeless. Their instructions and their love and their ability to overcome the world for you, if you apply to them with this loving attitude. So Sri Ramakrishna is not speaking. He says, therefore, in every age, God incarnates himself as the Guru to teach humanity. Satchidananda alone is the Guru. So it's Satchidananda that appears as the incarnation, and therefore it is timeless. It is without limitation. What is knowledge? And what is the nature of the ego? And now here we have it. Here we have it. Just exactly what the Baal Shem Tov said. What is knowledge and what is the nature of the ego? God alone is the doer and none else. That is knowledge. I am not the doer. I am a mere instrument in his hands. Therefore I say, O Mother, thou art the operator and I am the machine. Thou art the indweller and I am the house. Thou art the driver and I am the carriage. I move as thou movest me. I do as thou makest me do. I speak as thou makest me speak. Not I, but thou, but thou. So this is what the Baal Shem Tov meant, that by forgetfulness is the path to exile and separation. Remembrance is the path to God's embrace. So remembrance is remembering the truth, that this world machine that we inhabit, this action and experience suit that we inhabit, is a creation of the divine for its own purposes. And the sense of individuality that we have in this body is because of the reflection of the one individual, the one being that is the source, the creator, the sustainer, and the transformer. We are the instrument as this action and experience suit, and we are the witness as that divine presence indwelling within us. So that's the end of today's talk about the practice of love according to the Baal Shem Tov and Sri Ramakrishna. Any other comments or questions? It's well afternoon, so if anybody needs to go, of course, they should just...
Brother Shankara, what
Yes.
are the page numbers that you were reading from Thakur's?
Oh dear, I don't remember.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But you can find it by the date. You can find
Okay.
it easily by the date. The date was, let me get to the top of it, April 9th, Sunday, April 9th, 1882. And
Okay.
I believe it is at the end of chapter 2.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's at the end of chapter 2 of the gospel.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Who is speaking?
Bhagirath.
Bhagirath.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
loud and clear.
I know the time is short now, and there are so many points that can come as ramifying thoughts from so many things that you said. So I would use only one of them right now, because the term householder is a very deceptive term, time and again interfering with what we want to do in our life. Because when you say householder, is the man holding the house or the house is holding the man? This question needs to be answered, and actually it has been answered by two examples. Lord Buddha, he was a householder. Actually, he was a palace holder. He was in a palace, smooth, silken, totally comfortable life. He got out of it. He got out of it because he saw the futility of extending life into that circumstance without gaining any knowledge. Valmiki in Ramayana, for example, he was a robber. He was a professional robber. Until when he captivated a Rishi, the Rishi asked, "Why are you working?" He says, "I'm a householder. I have to feed my house." He says, "Ask them, would they share the sin that you are committing by robbing others?" And they say, "No, we never asked you to do that for us. You are doing of your own." Both of instances awakened the people because they wanted to wake up. So same way, one slap on the right cheek and one slap on the left cheek are wonderful example. But if the both cheeks slapped do not work, probably you need to work more.
Oh, yes.
To me, this is a connection. You know what you say, yearning. Yearning is a bridge between this space and the higher space.
Yes, indeed it is.
Yeah. So if you use it as a bridge, it will help. Otherwise, if you're stuck there on one side, it will not get you anywhere.
Mm.
So that's the way I'm feeling. But I think I would not prolong the discussion any further.
Thank you, Bhagirath. Thank you for all of that. Anyone else? All right, we'll close with this. And thank you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for being here this morning. The next opportunity for us to be together will be tomorrow evening, Monday evening, when we have the reading and discussion group on that book, Love Poems from God. Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amrutangamaya Abirabir Moiti. O dearly beloved, lead us from thy apparent, illusory truth to thy highest, absolute, unchanging, and eternal truth. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through. Light us through and through with thy everlasting shining presence. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us, and to all beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga Durga Durga. Go in Mother's loving and protective embrace. May we all be safe, healthy, and cheerful during this dreadful transformation. And that is sincerely a prayer for each of you. May you be safe, healthy, and cheerful. So, until next time, thanks for being here. Any final words from anyone? All right. Until tomorrow night or Tuesday night or Wednesday night or next Saturday or next Sunday, whenever we are together again. Thank you, dears.
Thank you.
Great class.
Thank you, Brother Shankar.
Bye-bye, dears.